record. And for the record, this meeting appears to be recording. Does everyone see that red dot in the top corner? Is that just me? Everyone can see it? Okay. And I'm also audio recording it should Zoom fail. So for the record, we're all being recorded. But I think with that, Mr. Mayor, I don't know any reason why not to proceed.
All righty. Well, let me pull up the right. All right. I will call this study session to order. And we're going to start with a discussion of tree code updates, which will be presented by Peter and Natalie. Just Peter? Just Peter.
Natalie will tag on at the end on a couple pieces, but yeah.
Hi, tree board members. Thank you for joining us.
So thank you, Mayor Gamba and Council. I am Peter Passarelli, the Public Works Director. Also this evening, joining us is Kathleen Brennan Hunter, our Tree Board Chair, and Gina Dake, our Vice Chair of the Tree Board. This evening, I would like to give Council an update on our tree code. The Tree Board and staff have been working on updating our city's tree code. We've spent some time revising the language in our code to better align with our vision, our climate action plan, and our urban forest management plan. The Tree Board's focus has been towards the street and public trees. There's another component of the tree code that we're going to work on with the Comprehensive Plan Implementation Committee as part of that process that relates to development and private property. So the Tree Board has premised much of their work on the ideal that healthy street trees should not be removed in the community. So that's made it it's made it a challenge as we've gone through the code, because the way that the code was written, it's called the tree cutting code. Chapter 1632 is called, the title is tree cutting. So it's made it a challenge, and it took a little bit longer than we expected. It's been a very iterative process. We spent a lot of time at our tree board meetings, going over code, talking about philosophy and ideals and thoughts on where we wanted to be with the code. Spent a lot of time with Justin, reviewing the code language that we put together. And honestly, we spent, we're not code writers, so we picked and pulled from various other codes around the community or around the region to see what we felt fit best for our code. And that presented some challenges too, because then the languages, the style's inconsistent. So we've spent a lot of time trying to make it consistent and reflect the style of Milwaukee. That being said, there's still some work that we need to do to clarify some things, still some revisions in a few areas. I think most notably, there's some work that we need to do on an addition that we brought into the code related to programmatic permits, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. But we've reached a point in the process where we felt that there were several items that we wanted to get some feedback from council on that would be useful so we could finalize the draft. And those are sort of the program fees that we want to establish for the tree program and tree code, exemptions related to those fees, a discussion about low-income assistance, and then also talk about the programmatic permit that we've established. So let me pull up the share the screen here. Scott, can you allow me to share the screen?
I should have just given you that permission. Yeah, just made you a co-host.
Okay, thank you.
I'll make Natalie a co-host too. And it looks like tree board member John Brown is in the attendees. I'll move him to the panel too.
Thank you. Okay, so I wanted to give a sort of a broad flavor of what we've worked on related to the code. And I mentioned earlier, we've focused these updates on the public and street trees. So the trees that as a local government we have that are within our right of way or on our public property. And like I said, we've meant to improve alignment with our vision, our climate action plan, and urban forest management plan. And as we've gone through there, we've made some significant edits and revisions to the code. We've added additional definitions, we've added acronyms, and then we've updated the language to be consistent on the definitions. So we're defining the things the same way in our tree code as we do in other parts of the code. And we've noticed some deficiencies as well with some of those definitions that are in other parts of our code, but we're trying to be consistent with those definitions. We sort of reestablished or revised the tree board's role to make them more of an advisory role. And I think that's what the intent of the original establishment of the tree board was. And since we've have on staff now an arborist, some of those additional initial responsibilities that we were looking at the tree board doing, I think we're able to shift some of those internally and allow staff to manage some of those things. We've established some language for a tree fund. And then we've sort of outlined and set up the administrative responsibilities with the city manager having the core responsibilities and the ability to delegate to designees. And a lot of that is going towards the urban forester. Used to be natural resource coordinator, but we've changed his title to urban forester. That would be Julian. We've gone through and updated the permitting process, added some language related to review criteria and approval standards, and pulled in the urban forester into that. And then we've added a section related to programmatic permits. That's really how we deal with utility maintenance, tree trimming pieces. And then we added some language in there related to low income assistance. And then there's a lot of stylistic changes. And I know I provided a draft document for you to review, and it doesn't really show the edits on there with what I've added and what I've deleted, because it made the document very difficult and cumbersome to read because there were so many edits and revisions. So, but I provided you the current code as well to sort of compare and contrast. Any questions on that? So as I mentioned, one of our core premises was that we believe that healthy street trees should not be removed. The tree board believes that we should recognize trees beyond their aesthetics in the community and treat them really as sort of co-inhabitants of the community for all the multitudes of co-benefits that they provide. We had a lot of discussion about this, and John and Gina spoke very strongly about this, the co-benefits and treating trees not as a single isolated unit, disassociated from everything else, but recognized for those co-benefits that they provide. We tend to focus on our hard-built infrastructure and overlook the natural infrastructure, the trees and vegetation that we have. And John or Gina, if you'd like to add in anything on that, feel free to. With that ideal in mind, the code that we develop sort of reduces the circumstances when healthy trees can be removed. We've felt that it was really important to elevate the importance of trees in the community. And as you can see off on the slide up there, the co-benefits that those trees provide are enormous, and they provide value, monetary value to residents in the community related to reduced energy usage at their homes in the summer because of the shading. It reduces our stormwater treatment that we have to do, the hard infrastructure that we have to build, the trees through capturing runoff as the rain falls, and capturing that reduces runoff. It improves air quality, the soil quality in the city. And really, as we've seen, is related to climate. It also reduces health heat island effects throughout the community. You can always see when it's hot outside, people like to go stand underneath the shade, because trees in some circumstances can reduce temperatures by up to 10 degrees Fahrenheit. And it's just a huge benefit that crosses all spectrums of the community. And we really felt that was important to discuss and point out to the council. And I know the council is well aware of those benefits as well. So, as we looked at the code, and I pulled some language out of the code that we put in there. So we felt that in the absence of extraordinary circumstances, the city would not permit the major pruning or removal of a healthy, functioning street tree or public tree. And through our discussions as the tree board, it became clear that maintenance or replacement of sidewalks or curbs, removal of tree litter or other minor inconveniences didn't necessarily constitute extraordinary circumstances. And with that in mind, we established some review criteria and updated the approval standards to cover that, to focus on those things. The section 1632-26 outline review criteria and approval standards that reflect, I think, the value of mature trees that we have in the community and the loss of time and benefits that occur when we remove those trees. The trees that are, reached 50 years old, they're at that maturity where the co-benefits are large and beneficial to the residents in the community. So we ended up going into the code and establishing some stricter approval standards related to the removal of healthy trees. And the bottom line on the removal of a healthy street tree, the circumstance when you could do that was where through beyond, if it exceeded reasonable arboricultural standards in terms of work to prevent further damage to adjacent infrastructure, that would be a point where a permit could be approved to do that. But just the general maintenance of a sidewalk getting tilted or heaved, we would want to look at what are those other opportunities to go in and make adjustments to the infrastructure. Because both of them we consider it as infrastructure. There's that hard infrastructure for the sidewalk, and then there's that natural infrastructure that the trees provide.
So Peter, what would that look like? What would be alternatives?
Well, I mean, there's a couple ways to do it. Certainly, I was going to refer to the language that I put in the code here. If I can find it real quickly, bear with me for a second. So I think what the language we put in there, that the tree, shrub, or other woody vegetation is having an adverse effect on adjacent infrastructure that cannot be mitigated by pruning reasonable alternative construction techniques or accepted arboricultural practices. So some of the reasonable alternative construction techniques would be something like you could mud jack a sidewalk. So you could level a sidewalk by going in and drilling some small holes in the sidewalk, and you can by inserting some foam material, you can adjust the sidewalk and level it out, and and do that. And certainly there are opportunities as well where the sidewalk can just certainly be replaced because the the value of the tree exceeds the sort of that value of that small piece of sidewalk. And that's generally sort of the thought that the tree board has had related to that infrastructure. But we recognize, the tree board recognizes that there are circumstances where that isn't always the case. You can't always have, it doesn't always meet that ideal circumstance. And then, you know, one of the other circumstances where healthy trees could be removed is related to infrastructure projects where it's necessary to accommodate some of the infrastructure improvements on the right of way, and it's not practical to modify those improvements and to avoid that removal or major pruning. And the practicalness relates to the cost. So it's sort of that cost benefit analysis there. And then
Peter?
Yeah.
That gave me a little bit of pause. If we establish some cost benefit analysis for city projects for this, we are setting a standard for non-city projects or people to say, well, the cost to adjust my project or to do this other thing exceed. So let's think more about how we do that.
Sure. I mean, there's certainly some objectiveness there in terms of values. There's some measurable costs that we could look at on how that would play out. There's also some subjectiveness to that as well. I think, and that relates to some of the review criteria. So, you know, we want to look at the trees, and we added some review criteria too to provide some further context for when a healthy tree could be removed or not removed. So, you know, is the tree appropriate for its location? So do we have a big, massive tree that's underneath the power lines and we're putting a sidewalk in, and the tree is going to impact the power line at some point in time? So maybe it makes sense as we're putting the sidewalk in to remove that tree because of the future impacts that we know that are going to occur, and the tree is never going to be able to fully mature, and plant a different type of tree that's not going to impact the power lines, or plant a tree in a different location. You know, as a tree is an invasive tree, and is the tree developing in a manner that it's going to continue to be a healthy tree, you know, at a later date? And that's where the experience of the arborist would come into play as he or she looks at that tree to make that determination. And does the maintenance of that tree create some sort of unreasonable burden on the adjacent property owner? So we recognize that there are some things that are unreasonable. I don't have what those numbers are in mind right now, and we can certainly work on that as we discuss that some more. And then we also want to make sure that the removal doesn't have a negative impact on the neighborhood streetscape.
Mayor, what are you thinking? Does this answer it, or?
Well, I just, if we're hard-nosed about it, then it's going to be harder for a developer or someone else to argue with it. But if we're seemingly hard-nosed for everybody else, but not so much for us, then we're going to end up in a place where, they'll point to, well, you guys just built a sidewalk here, and so whatever you considered, unreasonable costs to not, bend that sidewalk around in through the yard or take a parking space, whatever we didn't do to preserve that tree is going to be the measure at which a private individual or a developer or whatever is going to say, that's, you guys established the unreasonable cost right there. So that's why I'm just saying we might want to think this through carefully and establish some, and I'm just spitballing here, but like that data that we saw a few years ago said that a mature tree on a piece of private property adds $10,000 value to that private property. So there's an established value.
Well, one of the things that Peter did, I think, so Peter, correct me if I'm wrong, but we talked about was the diameter of the tree, which isn't a perfect indicator in every species of its age, but the diameter of the tree and the size of the tree adds cost for removal to make it more and more expensive the larger that we go, in hopes, I think, that we would protect some of those. The other recollection I have is that we had looked at the Portland program and had used some of their fee scales and some of their rules into this one. And I'm wondering, Peter, if you can talk a little bit just about how those came to be.
I do. I've got a couple of slides coming up on both of those, and I would mention, so that's another part of the discussion we wanted to talk about were exemptions, fee exemptions. And I'll get to the point, but just to put it out there, what I've got in the code, what we've got in the code right now provides an exemption for tree removal fees to the city. So when we get to that, we can talk about that part, but I've got that coming up. So
no, and I'm totally, that is an argument we can make, right? So if we have to pay that $10,000, it's just going to go into city coffers. It's at that point, it's funny money, right? As far as taxpayers are concerned, it's just moving around inside our budget. But I guess, it's the issue that we have constantly with our code where there's these terms, and I'm blanking, of course, at the moment, when developers are going to go in and we're required to avoid, mitigate, or avoid something or mitigate, and there's this reasonableness gray area that can be interpreted throughout every gradient of potential costs. And that's why I'm saying we're going to have to be careful to either establish within the code values or to never, when we're doing projects, do something where it saved us $3,000, some relatively minor amount, because that's what will be pointed to by a developer or by somebody else to say, see, I'm having to change my building concept by well over the $3,000 that you guys saved on that sidewalk project.
Mayor, should part of the evaluation include, a value on the benefit of that? So like the argument would go away if we also attached some kind of value to the public benefit that an infrastructure project would bring. So I don't know how we could do that in an objective way, but let's say we're talking about, building a sidewalk where there wasn't one ever before. on a very busy street. Assigning that some, significant value would help us justify, the removal of the tree. That would also, like you're talking about setting some standard, that a private development who wasn't providing some public benefit at all, or minor public benefits, wouldn't be able to reach that standard, because we've assigned some kind of, value. And I have no idea how to do that. We've got a lot of very smart people on our board and in our staff who can make that into actual code. But that's kind of what I'm thinking about. Like when you were making those comments, I was thinking, well, obviously the city wouldn't just willy-nilly go remove trees unless there was a damn good reason for it. So, putting value on those reasons, and it strikes me that it has to do with public benefit.
Yeah, no, that's a good vein to at least explore, to see if we can valueize that, so that when we are setting precedents, we're not setting precedents that are weak.
Yeah.
Well, and if we're not moving money in this, if we decide not to move cash from one pot to the other pot, you're also not going to be we won't be evaluating it on a price point that a developer will be able to come back and say, but on your own projects, you do X, Y, and Z. So you actually could use Councillor Faulkner's language about community benefit in that section for the exemption. And that would just actually pull the whole discussion out, I think. I'm not positive, but we could talk to Justin about that.
Well, I mean, so let's use the example of, a tree that's in the place where we are building a sidewalk, and one option is to curve the sidewalk around that tree, but that requires us buying right of way from the property owner in order to do that. That price that we didn't pay, like if the property owner says, I want $4,000 to do that, at that point we've established a price. And all I'm saying is there needs to be some awareness around that as we're doing this, because we could find ourselves a few years down the road, particularly given the SAFE program, having inadvertently set some precedent that developers or whoever would then be able to use against us.
Oh, that's all fair. Kelly will be back before we go through this again. So we'll ask her just to watch this portion of it and make sure that we have something in that section that explains the public benefit, and see if it works for what you're talking about, Mayor. If not, we can talk to you offline on that. But I think that the other thing to remember is that Kelly's actually been highlighting the tree component of all the SAFE projects for this very reason, to talk about those dual benefits that we're trying to pull together. So it may be as easy as adding something into that part of her work as well, and into the charters.
Yeah. And, another really good example is the Meek Street project. So we put in that new detention facility as part of that project. And on the site where that detention facility was, there were 13 trees. So we could not have...
Peter, I can't hear you.
I'm sorry. So the Meek Street project is another, I think, a good example where we just constructed a detention facility, and that construction of that facility required the removal of 13 trees to fit to fit the size facility that we needed for the stormwater detention, which was a community benefit. And at the same time, we went back in there and replanted close to, I think I counted them today, 41 trees as part of that project. So the 13 were replaced by 41. Now certainly, the 13 that we took down were a mix with some much more mature trees. But these trees, we did plant some more trees than that were there. So but it'll take some time for those to grow and provide some of those same benefits.
That might be a really good project to sort of like do this exercise for, of assigning some kind of public benefit, not just for the, how many trees that you replaced, but, that detention, what that means to the capacity improvement for our system. I don't know how to assign a dollar value to it, but certainly there's huge benefit to the public for keeping all that water out of the treatment plant.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll discuss that piece some more and see what we can come up with. So in addition to sort of this piece of where we want to prevent the removal of healthy street trees, to do that, part of some of those tools that we talked about are fees associated with that. So I think the next slide I have looks at some of the proposed fee schedules that we are suggesting. So the permit fee that you see there, that $50 permit fee, that's currently what's in our master fee schedule. So one of the things that we currently don't have is a tree removal fee. So the permit now, you pay a $50 fee. If the permit's approved, there's no cost associated with the removal of that healthy tree. So we're adding this in here to reflect that there's value to that tree, to try to prevent trees from being removed where it's not necessary to be removed. So we've got a scaled rate structure based off of the diameter of the tree. Julian had put this fee structure together. We had some discussions with it at the tree board, several discussions, and we felt that we were at a place where we wanted to bring this to the council and get some feedback on those fees. We also added a planting fee. So we've added the requirement that if you remove a tree, you need to replant a tree. There may be circumstances where a tree can't be replanted. So there's a planting and establishment fee that somebody can pay, that an owner could pay. And then that would pay for a replanting at another location and the maintenance and establishment of that fee by our staff. So making sure that we're watering on a routine basis. I added some dollars in there for a programmatic fee permit that we'll talk about in a little bit, and then an enforcement and restoration fee. So that's if somebody removes a tree or damages a tree without getting a permit, going through and getting a permit. So if somebody gets a pruning, decides they're just going to prune or top a tree. So this would be the fee associated with enforcement fee associated with that damage. Or if they removed a tree without going through the permitting process, this would be that enforcement fee associated with that.
Peter, can I ask a question? And I'm really glad we've got some tree board members, because maybe they can help me understand. I really understand and appreciate the fee for planting in lieu of planting. What I'm not getting my head around is why we would enforce a fee to plant a tree on someone's own dime when we're trying to get people to plant more trees. I think the last time I looked, because I live on a street that has right of way in Portland. Mm-hmm. The last time I looked, they don't require a fee for, if I wanted to plant a tree in the right of way, there's no fee. And so to me, that's an incentive to go out and of course, plant the appropriate tree that's on the list and plant it according to, making sure that's not going to disrupt any future improvements and, within specific, all the guidelines that the code would spell out. But why is there a fee to plant a tree?
I'm sorry if I confused that. I wasn't suggesting that there was a fee to plant a tree. So this would be the circumstance where somebody has had a permit to remove a tree. They don't want to plant a tree on that property. So there's a fee in lieu of planting. That's
Okay, I thought I heard you say that that we added a fee to plant a tree, and that was, and I thought I heard that was separate from the in lieu of, but if
I
there's,
misspoke. No,
Okay.
I did. So there's the
Okay.
removal fee and in lieu of planting.
okay, thank you for that clarification. That really helps me.
So just to be clear, these removal fees are the fees we would charge even if it meets all the criteria, the tough criteria that we're trying to establish. I guess,
If it's a healthy tree,
yeah.
a healthy street tree, this would be the fee that we would charge if it meets those criteria.
I mean, to
Peter,
me,
something happened with your voice, and I didn't hear what you said.
I said yes, I was just confirming what Lisa was saying, that yes, this would be the fee that we would charge if a healthy street tree was approved for removal.
So the key here is, so someone wants to cut down a healthy tree and they come to the tree board and say, we want to cut down this healthy tree.
They wouldn't go to the tree board. They would submit an application that would be reviewed by the urban forester, and he would look at,
Okay.
review it based off the review factors and then the approval standards that we've outlined.
Right. So the decision tree first is, are we even going to approve the removal of this healthy tree or not? Yes or no? And we are weighting the code such that the answer is more likely to be no, we are not going to accept this application. We value healthy street trees too much. So these are the fees that would apply if, for some reason, the urban forester looks at the application and says, all right, there is a valid reason to remove this. There's I don't know, a broken sewer line that is directly under the tree that cannot be accessed without excessive root disturbance. I don't know. I'm making things up.
Yeah.
And so this would be the fee that would apply in that kind of scenario where there's really a reason to remove a healthy tree. There's no reason that the request should be denied. Is that a correct assessment, Peter? Do I have that?
Yes, and it sort of gets to the point where, the tree board wants, the discussions that we've had, we want trees to be valued as an asset and not as a liability or a cost to the city. So there's a value associated with that asset.
Mhm.
And by removing that asset, there's a loss in value to the community.
Yeah.
And we want to capture that loss in value there.
I think what I was trying to get to is maybe I was reading into your voice here, Councillor Beatty, I don't know, but looking at those fees and going, is that enough money? So I wanted to make sure I had the context correct around the times at which these fees would be applied.
Well, and I've got a slide that can show you that it's probably based on some analysis, it's not necessarily enough money.
Yeah.
So
well, so just to be clear, I mean, if we look at the list of things, the sort of the criteria, approval standards at SS 1718, so some of them are, some of them are things that are beyond a homeowner's, property owner's control. One of them is a noxious weed list. I mean, I get told by the backyard habitat people all the time that I need to get rid of the holly trees in my yard.
so that's actually not on the noxious weed list, the Oregon noxious weed list. The only tree on there is the tree of heaven.
Oh, really?
Yes.
The holly trees are not. Okay. But I mean, are we going to charge somebody that kind of a fee if they have a tree of heaven that's,
So the tree of heaven would qualify.
So Peter, maybe it's the confusion is around, these are for the healthy tree removals of allowed approved species, native species that we want to promote. And then there's also a list of situations in which you would take a different path, such as invasive species, such as dead or diseased trees, where these fees would not be applied, right, Peter?
Yes, yeah.
That raises a really good, would there be, what about, so healthy tree, I guess I wonder, you know, is there some list of trees? I mean, you know, Tree of Heaven's, you know, a great example, but there might be some other examples of trees that are just really bad trees for that place, but it's healthy, you know? So is there good, could there also be a list of trees that are problematic for that someone could go by?
I think so. Yeah. So, the way our code currently reads is we refer to the invasive species. It refers back to the Oregon noxious weed list. And the only tree on there is that Tree of Heaven. So there's nothing, we could certainly put some language in the code that says, or as identified in our public works standards, there's some other invasive species or other noxious species that we prefer not having. But I think the review criteria also allows the urban forester to make sure, is the tree appropriate for its location? So, that gets back to like, hey, we got this big tree that's underneath the transmission line, and it's going to grow, and it's going to impact the electrical system, distribution system for the community. Or the tree, it may be healthy now, but there may be something that's going to impact it in the future related to some of those things. So this is probably, there might be an appropriate time for removal, because it's going to end up having some negative impacts in the future that are going to be detrimental and at a much larger cost. So there are those sort of circumstances, I think, as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I'd like the idea of referring to, you know, a longer list of problematic trees. You know, if there are trees that in certain circumstances that, I mean, the holly, I thought those were, I definitely thought those were a listed tree, and so to hear that they're not is kind of surprising. I guess they don't really get that big, but I suppose I guess and maybe it's also with the title of just healthy tree, like limiting it only to healthy trees is maybe causing me some pause. Maybe it could be beneficial and healthy trees or something along those lines, so it's clear that we're not necessarily looking to that we're really just to make sure that our goals are clear.
Mhm.
Okay.
So Councillor Faulkner, just to make sure that I'm understanding correctly, are you looking for something that talks then about height, underlines, things like you said that could be considered not ideal, like holly trees or arborvitae? I don't know what else we would have out there, even though I think those are technically a bush. Or are you looking at, or are there other things that should be on that list beyond just, one of the things I think Peter mentioned is that some ash trees are seeing significant degradation from pests and are probably all going to die out around the same time. So we could include something around that. Are we missing anything on that list?
Well, there's, I don't know how big of a problem it is here, but certainly when I lived in Missoula, there was all sorts of talk about how problematic Norway maples were for their habit of root intrusion into water and sewer mains. So if there are other trees that have those kinds of characteristics that we know either lead to, like in the case of holly, you have natural resource degradation because the holly berries are eaten and they spread holly absolutely everywhere. It's bad for habitat. You've got infrastructure challenges with trees like Norway maple. Trying to think.
What about sweet gum trees? I mean, mine have invaded my driveway and my sewer lines, water lines.
I think one of the ways that we've handled that is we've made some additions. We've made some changes to the street tree list. So we've revised what street trees are, what are appropriate trees to plant in the right of way based on the space that's available to plant, and both, the horizontal distance and vertically as well. So we've updated that list to sort of capture some of those things. These are like the appropriate trees to plant in the right of way or on public space in Milwaukee. It's not an exhaustive list, and certainly there are trees that we've missed that are appropriate that fit that. But we did try to go through that and identify and leave off that list trees that we really didn't want to be planted. And but at the same time, we've looked at it from the fact that the climate's changing and what might be appropriate to plant now. Or what we feel is native and appropriate to plant now might not thrive 50 years from now or 100
Yeah.
years.
So if we refer to that, I mean, that's definitely kind of where my head was at. That, like, I'm thinking about, like, maybe it's, approved healthy tree, removal fee. Like, I guess I'm just sort of thinking, like, there could, someone could consider, a problematic tree healthy, and so then, it wouldn't. I'm just thinking about a situation where, like, you're charging this fee for a tree that's, like going into the root, going into the sewer line. I mean, it's seen, because and it probably is not on the list of an approved street tree. It should just be, it should be removed because it's going to wreak havoc, and there shouldn't be this. I guess I'm just sort of struggling with the idea that, a homeowner, is going to be hit with a potentially $3,000 plus, fee for removing a healthy, invasive, problematic tree.
Well,
Counselor,
and it could also be that maybe they've lived in the house 10 years and there's trees in the right of way, but they were planted there 30 years ago or 40 or 20 or whatever, but they weren't the right kind, and or they're tearing up the sewer pipes or the water pipes or something.
Yeah. And to address
happening.
Yeah, and to address climate change, that list should be it should be updated continually.
Updated, and it's probably not. Yeah.
But I mean, that list will never be, I mean, I don't think we ought to focus just on, I mean, what we say we want people to plant is one thing. What's out there is another thing.
Yeah.
And not everything that's out there that's not on the list is bad. And there's still probably plenty of good trees that just aren't on our list, but they're okay. They're not, invasives or whatever.
So a quick question. If we, Councillor Faulkner, I heard you talk about the tree planting list. I also heard you use it on the flip, which would be if it is on that list, then you don't pay. I'm sorry, if it is on that list, you do pay. If it's off that list, you don't pay for the removal. So I'm just trying to make sure that I'm really clear on if it's a problematic tree that doesn't qualify, you don't want them to pay. I think that ideally we would want something from the tree list planted in its place.
Oh, yes, of course.
So
I don't know
I
how we say problematic tree without having something to go by.
Totally.
That's why I agree about the tree list, but I don't think that's a great solution. I just don't know of a better one.
Well, we have trees that are street trees that aren't on the tree list. So we don't have sequoias on the tree list. We don't have redwoods on the tree list. So those are trees that have huge value and provide much shade and all sorts of co-benefits. So just because it's not on the list, it should be, it would qualify it for not having to pay some sort of removal fee. And then I just wanted to go back because you had said the problematic piece, and you talked a little bit about some root intrusion and maybe your lateral pipes. So I think what the tree board's been trying to say is those are some of the circumstances that don't necessarily meet an extraordinary measure. It's beyond sort of the normal maintenance as a homeowner that you should be doing for your infrastructure that relates to your home. So, periodically as a homeowner, if you've owned a home for a long time, you're going to need to replace your sewer lateral. You might need to replace your water service from those sorts of things. And it's the cost of ownership of that home. There's certainly reasonable techniques, construction techniques that can be done that aren't very costly to remove roots from a lateral. So I just wanted to sort of point that out. So they may seem sort of problematic and there's a cost associated with them, but I think the tree board's thought was it's not extraordinary. So and the benefits of the tree outweigh some of those costs.
I guess, certainly if we're talking about a lateral that's been there for decades and decades and decades, but if you've got a problematic tree, one of these species that we've talked about, that throw crazy roots super fast, then is there an evaluation by the city then of how old is that lateral? Is it normal maintenance, to have to replace it in just 10 years? That's not normal maintenance to me. That's a different set of circumstances.
I hear you.
Like if but for the bad tree, like, if there would be no reason to replace that lateral, but except that there's this really aggressive problematic tree that's busted into it because it, then I think that's different than normal maintenance. And I'm not suggesting that we don't charge, like I said, the limitation of the street tree is a challenge for me as I'm thinking about this, because I don't want to waive fees for removing a huge sequoia. That is definitely not the path I want to go down. But I also recognize that there are, some really fast growing problematic trees that are I wouldn't, I guess, just simply saying healthy is kind of problematic for me.
Well, we'll discuss, we'll see if we can identify some trees that might qualify as problematic at the tree board. We'll have that further discussion on that.
I do see Gina waved her hand. I don't know if you wanted to say something real quick, Gina.
Yeah, thanks, Natalie. I did just want to chime in along those lines real quick, that we very consciously did not choose the route of having a nuisance tree species list. I know that the city of Portland does have one, and that is maintained by the Bureau of Environmental Services. But a problem with that is that you can have a tree like a Norway maple that was very popular to plant many decades ago, is very common as a street tree. And if you say, okay, we've got this nuisance species list and the Norway maple's on there, that's sort of a free ticket to go ahead and remove a large portion of the city's canopy that they're really not prepared to replace. Because even when you replant, you still don't see those benefits of mature trees for decades. And then we also wanted to give the urban forester a little bit more discretion, which is something that can be common in a code. It means a lot more responsibility to make sure that the person who has that role is, following the plans that you have in mind, but they will see those situations more often of, wow, only 10 years and you're having to replace your line because of this tree. Normal. Or, they'll see those same situations over and over again in the context of green infrastructure and built infrastructure.
Thanks for that, Gina. That's helpful. And I know that Norway maples are kind of a difficult example, so I appreciate you running with what I had already started there. Because it's true, they are problematic when they are planted in the wrong spot, and that's the only time they're problematic. Otherwise, they're just a nice maple tree. But if they're not in close proximity to sewer lines or water lines that they infiltrate, then they're beautiful and do all the things and provide all of the co-benefits that we seek from our trees. So it's a good reminder.
So Peter, before you go from this slide, I mean, I don't know what the plan is once this is, adopted code for the outreach, but especially the last items, the enforcement and restoration fees. I mean, I like them. I have, but I can tell you, I probably about every 2 or 3 years, somebody in my neighborhood is cutting a tree without getting permission. And I'm calling.
On a right-of-way tree?
Yes. Yes. And I called Tim Salyers and, I mean, I contacted you and Tim about some when a house was being flipped last year. So I do think it's going to be really important. I will tell you, just thinking about the situations where that's happened over the past dozen or so years, I think some people really didn't know that they needed to get a permit, and other people did and were just trying to do it fast before anybody noticed. I do think there will need to be a lot of public outreach about this. I mean, like a special edition of the pilot about knowing what you're not assuming, where the right-of-way line is, and know, that a lot of what people think is their yard is actually right-of-way, and et cetera, and that there's this process and you need to follow it. And yeah.
And we've had some considerable discussions at Tree Board about outreach as we make these changes to the code and the effort that we're going to have to do to inform and educate the community about these changes. So yeah, I appreciate those comments. So
I strongly agree with Lisa. People do not understand the concept of right-of-way, do not know where their border is with the right-of-way. And, I'm sure the engineers would happily regale you with all kinds of stories as they're trying to roll out the SAFE program about people who believe that was their own personal private space. So we are going to have to really do a great job of education and outreach on this.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
okay, let me just to move on. I wanted to share some information. What happened here? It's like my slide doesn't want to move. There we go. So we did spend some time looking at how we valued trees and the what I've circled in the chart. So John Brown, one of our tree board members, had put together this model and looked at some commonly sized trees and put some appraisal values based off of what he used a trunk formula valuation method to appraise trees based off of their size, condition, and some of the limitations. So, and then what I've got circled there shows what that appraised value might be for that model tree and what that fee would be. And the fees that we talked about would be implemented through our master fee schedule, by the way. So that those would not be in the code, but we'd put them in the master fee schedule so we could adjust those as we needed. But that's just to show that even these fees really don't capture the value of those trees. And that's just the appraised value. Those aren't some of the co-benefits. And, Natalie had actually put together the little table next to you from using a tool called iTrees that shows you some of the co-benefits that trees provide. I don't know if it looks like some of the screens are on there, but, it takes a look at the carbon dioxide sequestered, stormwater intercepted, and air pollution benefits, and provides like a dollar value. So I wanted to show you that we put some thought into this and into those figures that we had there, and even then they really don't capture that full value of the benefits that the trees provide. both aesthetically and all the co-benefits as well.
Peter, sorry.
Oh, I was just asking, so why not? Why did we end up with the fee schedule we ended up with, or sorry, the you know what I'm talking about, the last slide. How did we?
Well, John asked the same question. I think Gina's probably said the same thing. And it's just maybe my sort of my nature feeling that some of those fees could be burdensome become really sort of burdensome and problematic when somebody does need to remove a healthy tree for some reason. So that's why.
If we feel pretty good about this appraised value numbers, if we feel like that's solid and defensible, it might make sense to somehow at least have the percentages be consistent. Right? You know, it's like right now, the very worst thing you could possibly have is a 20-inch tree. Right? It just would make sense if the value as compared to the cost of cutting that tree was commensurate somehow. Ballpark.
There probably is some variability, and I do not know how to appraise a tree, but depending on the species, you know, I'm sure these values could go up or down and have a window of value. So that might be a puzzle for Julian and maybe John can help us figure that out. But I can see maybe getting around that 5 to 70% mark, maybe.
And I did want to get to the slide where we talk about our low income program before we go too far into the total final cost, just so that we can have a well-rounded discussion about that.
Okay. One of the other things we wanted to I don't know what happened. Oops. I'm sorry. Seems like there's an extra slide on top of that. I'm not quite sure why that is. We did provide some exemptions to some of the fees. So if there's a hazardous tree that there wasn't a permit requirement or a removal fee associated with it, if somebody was going to do minor maintenance, minor pruning on a street tree, there weren't fees associated with that. And then what I've got in the code right now, and we wanted to have this discussion, was public improvement. I have in the code right now, the way it's written is I've exempted the city from paying the removal fee for trees that are removed as a result of public improvement projects, city projects that we're doing. For example, the detention pond facility, the 13 trees that we removed there based on the values that were on one of the previous slides, that was about $27,500 in costs that would have cost the city using those fees. So there's an impact to the city, to the infrastructure projects that we would have. And if the city was going to pay those fees, those charges or those fees would go back into the tree fund. So it's moving money from one pot to the other, but it does impact perhaps project budgets.
Can I ask on the hazardous tree part of it, was there any discussion about whether we're creating a perverse incentive for people to not take care of trees because, oh, I'm just going to let this tree wither away so that I can get rid of it for no fee or something? I mean, is there something we should think about doing? I don't know how, yeah. I mean, I don't know what it would be, but is there something we should think about doing that that identifies trees that may become hazardous trees or something. I don't know.
That did come up in our discussions about the tree maintenance, and I think from the tree board's perspective, one of the things that is really important is that public outreach and education to the community to make sure that people understand the benefits and the value that these trees provide. That's also part of the reason why I put in some recommendations for fees related to somebody deliberately damaging a tree to make it a hazardous tree in the future. So we have those sort of fees there. If we can identify that somebody deliberately did damage a tree, then we have that mechanism for enforcement.
So I had a question. We have a tax that goes toward the arts, and when we bought a new city hall, we did pay that fee. So and this is an open question for everyone, is if we are not applying that same standard to trees, is that right?
That's a really good policy question.
Didn't we also pay the art fee when we built the library?
Yep, we did.
We actually provided separate money for that, but yes.
And it was a smaller amount than, it wasn't the standard charge.
Correct. It wasn't 1% for that project.
Okay.
But we did do it for the City Hall project. That was a part of the calculation. And because Kelly's not on this call, she and I did talk. She spoke with Peter earlier in the week about this policy question. It's a good one. It's a question to all of you. It is moving it from places like our utility rates and our safe money into the tree fund. But it could also act as a disincentive for future engineering departments to remove trees. So I think it's a great question, and I think that both Peter and Kelly are open to the answer. It does mean that for these current safe projects, we would have new added costs that were not calculated in when we approved those projects.
Mm-hmm. Would they be?
Wow.
Would they be substantial costs? Because my understanding is that we've done a pretty good job of prioritizing not removing trees in our designs.
We have, absolutely. And if we want to, tonight we're not approving this. This is a discussion on a study session. So if you're interested in us calculating what those costs would be for some of our next 3 or 4 years worth of projects, we could do a run and see what kind of numbers we're coming in at. The thing that I've talked to Peter about and that I like on this is that our tree, it moves money into a tree fund that otherwise we don't have a funding mechanism for. And the group that's going to be doing a substantial amount of removal will be us for projects. And I don't mean that it's as many as we would have been doing historically. We've worked very, very hard not to remove trees through the SAVE program. So I don't want to exaggerate that number. But we are going to be doing a lot of work on our streets over the course of 7 more years.
Mm-hmm.
So would that tree fund then provide the finances for planting new trees? I mean, would that be
That's part of the
benefit
program.
of that? So,
Yep.
I mean, because we'd need to do that anyhow, but now it's in its own fund, which we can see. I mean, so I can see a benefit in that. I mean, I'm not saying I'm in support of either direction at the moment, but I appreciate that it was brought up because I think it should give us pause to consider what are the ramifications of either of those scenarios.
Well, and in some cases, sorry, Counselor, go for it.
Well, I was just going to say, in the example like the mayor gave before, where we have to save a tree, we have to buy some right of way from somebody. We have to loop the tree and then we have to buy some right of way. I mean, maybe it makes that be a more thoughtful decision because it's going to cost us either way.
Right.
And so it's going to cost the project either way. And so maybe it makes us be more creative and inventive in some of those, deciding to do some of those negotiations.
Well, yeah, and I'm kind of curious. I mean, if we forewent, I guess you'd say that instead of forego, you know, a fee of $27,000 and change for the 13 trees that were removed in the Meek Street project, then how much did it then cost us to replace that with what is it, 41 trees and that went in? And so could that fee have offset the cost of the new trees, which I would imagine, you know, you got to consider, but maybe it still would have left some money in the pot, so to speak, for other needs that came up, like you got to buy a piece of right of way or whatever. I mean, I think there's a lot of question in all of that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. If you're interested, we can come back with a couple of scenarios. One that looks at what the cost would be on the upcoming projects. One that looks at maybe a different policy option for number quota planting. So if you plant X more on the site because it's all right of way or all city property, that you could offset it somehow. I'm not sure, but we'll look at it. We'll talk to Kelly when she's back if this is something that there's general agreement on.
Okay.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thanks. I briefly wanted to talk about programmatic permits. So one of the things we added into the code was a programmatic permit. This was, I think Portland,
Whoa, something's happening.
Portland has a programmatic permit, and what that sets up is a structure for utilities like PGE when they're going out and they're doing their tree trimming. We've got a permit that sets conditions for that permit, requires public notice to the neighborhood and to the property owners that are adjacent to where that trimming is occurring. And there's also a small fee associated with it for that 2-year programmatic permit. So we're setting up standards, telling PG what our standards are, making sure that they're doing things to arboricultural accepted tree trimming standards that are set by ISA that they say that they're following, and making sure that the community that's adjacent to that knows what's going on ahead of time, that somebody's going to be coming, they're going to be trimming trees, and this is what's going to happen. I've got some work to do on the code language that we put together, but that's sort of what we're looking at trying to do there.
And we don't do that now. They don't have any kind of permit from us.
No, there's no permit. There's no public notice. There's
definitely no public notice because they come around here and I go, oh, darn, they're coming. And I have to go out there and fight with them about how much they can cut off of my tree. Other cities, you said Portland has this. So this
Portland, yes, Portland does.
Yeah. Okay. So it won't come as a shock to them.
No, I've got a discussion with them in the next week or two about it too. So, I mean, it's nothing that scares them. They're just wanting to know what sort of the requirements are or what the requirements may be depending on.
And Peter, I believe this matches the Portland rate. Is that correct?
No, it's Portland actually has a 5-year permit that's $6,500. And talking with Julian, we felt that was really sort of long, a long time frame, and we wanted a little bit more. We wanted a shorter time frame. So,
thank you.
Okay. And then one of the other things we wanted to talk about was low-income assistance. I know in the past when we've talked about where we were in developing tree code, when we talked about our urban forest management plan, we had some significant discussions about how do we help those that are struggling to take care of some of these things that may be a burden. They may not be able to afford that. So we've got some language in there that is consistent with how we look at household income in other parts of our code. And what we're suggesting is that the permit fee, removal fees, and replanting fees could be waived. And then if needed, the city could certainly assist with removal if funds are available. So if there's a street tree, a dangerous tree that's out in front of somebody's home, and they're unable to remove it, and they meet the threshold, the income threshold, then we could assist with that removal if necessary.
Can I maybe offer a suggestion for us to think about? You know, I'm looking at this, and my reaction is that, you know, the to the extent that the city funds are available, that should really only apply to the assisting with removal. I think that we should just leave, you know, the other part of the code, city manager may exempt. I mean, and that there could be all kinds of situations where they wouldn't. But I guess that feels weird to me.
Because we're waiving fees.
Because we're waiving a fee, and so, you know, it does. I mean, I just think that, like, we should just establish a policy that says, you know, if you meet this income threshold, the city manager may exempt. I mean, I think that's enough. Like,
And that would be consistent with
Yeah.
other language we have in other codes. So that sounds great, Councilor Faulkner. In general, though, does this meet what you all are looking for around low income?
What's the median household income at this point? Do we know? I just want to get an idea of what we're talking about.
It's 65.
That's Milwaukee's. That's not the metro.
Oh, okay. So Metro's
Metro.
Yeah, it's using the MSA. So didn't we have that in our
Probably
comp
like
plan?
75 or something.
yeah, why? I mean, why aren't we using Milwaukee's? We have very good, reliable data here.
Yeah, we have really current data for Milwaukee.
Yeah, no, we can move that over, and Councilor Parks will get you that information when we bring this back next time with what
Okay.
that would be for the median.
That is, at least when we were a month ago, when we were doing comp plan, I looked at that and it was 65 at that point. Yeah.
For Milwaukee?
For Milwaukee.
I was thinking it was somewhere in 54, but 65?
Or 63. It's in the 60s.
Wow. Okay. All right. Thank you.
It's gone
Yeah,
up very, very fast in recent years.
Let's revisit that to get it for sure, but we can.
So if I understand you, you want to, instead of the Portland MSA, we want to call it just the Milwaukee. Okay. Good. And then I think Natalie's going to address the next, I've got 2 more slides that Natalie's going to talk about. So we just wanted to sort of talk about trees and equity as well. So.
Thanks, Peter. While we were, you know, developing this urban forest program and expanding it, something that was called out in the urban forest management plan, as well as that's been highlighted in the region, is the inequitable distribution of trees in relation to low income, BIPOC, and marginalized communities. So tree cover provides us with a wealth of benefits, as Peter mentioned. Not only are there infrastructure benefits from minimizing things like stormwater entering into stormwater systems, as well as you know, other stabilization and soil quality benefits, but there's also a lot of public health benefits that trees provide communities. High tree cover can cool a community, even in the hottest heat waves, up to something like 10 degrees cooler at a shaded block than other neighborhoods. Trees also provide cardiovascular benefits, mental health benefits, respiratory benefits through air quality control. A lot of these public health concerns, high rates of respiratory issues, high rates of mental health, and other physical health impacts are also disproportionately burdened by our low-income, BIPOC, and marginalized communities, who are also frontline communities for climate change and urban pollution. So it's really important for us to recognize the historical disparities that these communities have faced, and some of these disparities caused by lack of tree canopy in the areas which these communities reside. So I just wanted to, we have some tools available to us as we begin looking at our urban forest planting program to start prioritizing different areas in Milwaukee to plant trees. But, I come from, looking at the statistics and data, I thought that these graphics better represented a statistical image for us to look at how, the tree canopy varies for different communities. So this here is taken from City of Portland's Equitable Urban Forest Citywide Tree Planting Strategy Report. That was from 2018. And you can see where you have populations of color in Portland on that bottom figure, as well as where you have the highest percentage of tree canopy in Portland. And you can see that there's a dramatic difference in both of those areas. And you can also, I grew up in Portland. There's definitely areas where you walk through and you don't see a tree. It's usually because there's high transit corridors, lots of development, lots of urbanization. And that's also where you can see a lot of multifamily housing and a lot of these, lower income housing going up. If you want to go to the next slide. I also was trying to figure out how we can represent this in Milwaukee. Now, Milwaukee is difficult because we're a small community, and so we don't necessarily have the statistical area to really visualize some of these things. So I was playing around with some data and GIS to try to kind of show how this isn't, it doesn't just happen in Portland. We're just south of them, and we have the same issue. I just wanted to show it statistically. So you see here, this is the most recent land cover data that I could get. This is from a Metro combination of ARLIS EPA data for land cover. But on the left, you can see that gray and dark gray shading. That is the built environment. So that's stuff like pavement and buildings. You can see it's heavy around transportation corridors. It's heavy throughout industrial areas, large commercial areas. But then on the right, you see these are the 2016 low-income census tracts. And that's not to say we don't have low-income communities in Milwaukee. This is just on the census tract layer. So, as we start to average out sizes, you start to lose that data. But you can see the low-income census tracts are also right on top of those heavily built out areas. These are communities which face these disparities where we should be prioritizing, and we should definitely be ensuring that tree canopy is available for all of the benefits that trees provide. And so, it just calls out the importance of some of the work that Milwaukee is doing when we start looking at where we want to expand our tree canopy to provide communities benefits, and the sensitivity that we need to take in for when we start to prioritize certain areas to ensure equitable access to the tree canopy and the benefits that trees do provide Milwaukee residents. It also really highlights the importance that for especially street trees, where they are right next to this heavy, dark pavement, and where we do have the benefit from which it's public property, and we can arguably have more control over ensuring a shared access to those tree canopies and making sure that, we're not removing maybe the few trees that are within a heavily built neighborhood for the residents who probably do really appreciate their presence. So, I think that it's important work that the tree board and that, the city is doing as we start to really look at how we value trees and especially apply this this lens of equitable access to green spaces.
Thanks, Natalie. I think that wraps up what I had. Is there any questions or further comments?
I guess oh, go ahead, Councilor Beatty.
I had a few language comments, which I'll just send to you in a email, Peter. I don't want to tie everybody up on those, but I guess I had two bigger comments that I'd like the group to think about. One, and I spoke to an arborist about this today, actually. One is cutting trees in nesting season. Was there any discussion of that?
I don't think we had any discussion about seasonal cutting of trees.
So I asked an arborist if, you know, if he could point me to some code of other locations about, you know, the Migratory Bird Act and cutting trees in nesting season. He says, well, that's just standard. He's like, oh, I don't know about code. That's just standard professional responsibility of arborists to not do that, and that he would, if he was hired on a job and he found a tree that had nesting going on, he would tell the people, we have to wait 2 months till the birds have fledged. I guess I would like to hear the tree board's thoughts on that and how we should deal with that. The other thing he said to me was, we really missed an opportunity at Meek Street by not planting oaks, and that we should be planting oaks wherever they can go, wherever there's room for them. And so I wanted to plant that idea also with the tree board.
No pun intended.
No, you all, oh, go ahead if you have.
I was just going to say, yeah, we ended up, I think we planted 14 ponderosa pines and 26 or 27 incense cedar along as part of that project. We didn't plant any deciduous trees.
And he thought those were good selections because those are trees that are going to do better with climate change. But he definitely thought in Milwaukee we need to be planting oaks. You know, we've made such a thing about the dogwood for so many years, but that we really need to be planting oak trees.
How do oaks feel about wet feet? Because the Meek Street is a retention pond.
He thought that would be fine.
Because I went to Linfield College, which has historic oak groves, and there was a lot of research that they did and determined that having wet feet was problematic for Oregon white oaks at certain times of year. So it may be seasonal, but my understanding has always been that they are, they're not super excited about standing water.
Well, but that thing is an edge, right? The trees, if you saw the photo that Peter showed us earlier, the trees are up on an edge. They're not going to be in standing water except at very high water events. Yeah.
I think there's going to be importance in outreach and education for right tree, right place. I think there's also a lot of exciting work with Oregon White Oak. There's the Oregon White Oak mapping project that's happening in the region. My good colleague is on the White Oak Intertwine Alliance.
Oh yeah, I went out to.
My computer went black all of a sudden. I was like, I don't know if I'm gone. but anyway, so I think, you know, when we're reaching out to community members and hopefully helping them choose the right tree for the right place. I just planted a white oak in my front yard, so I could tell everyone all about it. But you know, I think that's going to be an important thing, is just making sure folks are hopefully prioritizing some species that need a little help.
Well, the diversity of species is important. So, you know, when I went out there and looked and counted, I actually wish that we had a little bit more some diverse plantings. It's sort of monoculture-ish along the street there with all the incense cedars. So having that some diversity there is helpful. So, yeah.
Are the incense cedars doing better than the red cedars?
That's what he said.
And are they predicted to continue to do better than the red cedars as things warm and dry?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. The Western red cedar. Yeah. Yeah.
Those things
I
are,
actually have experience with incense cedar not doing that well in the Portland metro area. There's a problem called ceridium canker, where cankers form on the limbs and they can end up having dieback, which doesn't always kill the tree, but can make it look not as landscape ready. But I have not seen it in Milwaukee.
Generally, I'm excited about this. I like the strength of it. I like that we're actually putting significant values on the trees, that we're trying to promote the concept that this is a critical part of our city. I'm kudos, great job to Tree Board. I guess my only concern, and this is, I'm a broken record on this one, you know, the tree code on private property is taking so long that by the time we establish it, there won't be any more trees on private property that's going to get developed, because it'll all be developed. I mean, development hasn't really slowed down in Milwaukee. There's not that many well-treed lots left. So I get wanting to do the robust process. It's the same reason that the tree board or the PARB sort of punted on this years ago. But, you know, there's not a lot of well-treed lots left.
Well, it's part of the CPIC work this year, right?
Yes.
And
It is. It's set to be a part of the housing discussion.
Yeah, it's in the contract.
But, okay, let's say that happens. When does that mean there's actual tree code on the books?
A year from now.
Yeah.
Year to 15
That's the
months
plan.
from now.
Yeah, we signed the contract the day after our last meeting, so we were moving. And the CPIC's been working for the last month and a half, 2 months.
Okay.
But we hear you, Mayor, and I do know that that's a concern, and it's been a concern for us for a long time. I really appreciate that the tree board has put so much time and effort into trying to get this code right. And it is exceptional. And I think that they're excited about the work that's going to come out of the CPIC. And I think that we all should be.
I have a related concern to what the mayor brought up, which is I watched how Portland developed its tree code, and truly you would walk through neighborhoods and it was just the sound of chainsaws everywhere as developers were trying to cut down trees before the tree code was finalized, because they had had so much time to see the end result and decided that they could save a few bucks if they did that first. And so many mature old oaks, heritage trees almost, were lost in many neighborhoods. So I guess I would just, yes, I am enthusiastic about the robust process. I also hope that when we get to that point, and I know some of that is incumbent on council, but when we get to that review process, let's do everything we can to not drag it out, because we will end up in a similar circumstance if we're not careful.
Well, I think that's a good point. And I also think that, I mean, we talked a few years back, we talked about doing a heritage tree program as maybe a first step. And I'm not necessarily suggesting we need to do that. But I do think part of the outreach and education could be picking some truly great trees and like have a tree of the month every month in the pilot. This beautiful tree in this neighborhood and what's special about it and blah, blah, blah. And, sort of promoting the value of trees. And so that if people start cutting trees, their neighbors maybe are a little more alarmed about it.
Well, and my point is really, let's have the draft code. Let's not wait more than a month if we can avoid it at all before we adopt the code. You know what that's what I'm getting at is the process piece. Let's not have draft code on the table for 6 months.
Well, it's got to go through planning commission and then us.
Yep.
So not going to be that
Sure.
bad.
But
So what I can commit
I'm not
to,
trying to put numbers around it. What I'm trying to say is let's not drag it out. Because that is a danger.
and I can commit to us moving things efficiently through the system. Vera is very committed to moving things efficiently through the system. But I do just want to highlight, I think that some sections of the comp plan took 3 or 4 meetings just at the planning commission and then a couple at ours. So what we'll probably do is clear both the planning commission nights and clear the council nights to be able to get through those code packages.
Great. That sounds great. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Before we move on, I had I just wanted to encourage as much as possible, you know, the talk about missed opportunities. You know, I've been thinking about that a lot on, you know, with SAFE and some of the projects that I've seen that have already been done, you know, with really, you know, with curb tight sidewalks, you know, those are missed opportunities for tree planting in the right of way, you know, as we're developing a program to be more aggressive about tree planting. And, you know, to the extent that it's possible, I would really, really hope that the tree board, you know, can be working as much in tandem, you know, with engineering and PSAC in when they're finalizing, you know, the various designs, you know, for those projects, because, you know, I can, you know, point to you in places where I think, yeah, there really could have been a tree planting strip there. And we didn't. So, and I know it's, you know, a money saver in some places. It's lack of, you know, huge right of way in some other areas, but to the extent possible, if, you know, if we can at least, you know, really be mindful of, you know, are there opportunities to plant trees in the public right of way? I want to be doing that as much as we possibly can, because I do think that that's where so much of our opportunity is.
And I just want to add to that. I would be remiss if I didn't, because I've had multiple conversations with neighbors about this, that seeing this as an opportunity to really engage with landowners is important. As we are doing street tree plantings, making sure that people feel like they have choice, that they've been included in the conversation, and are invested in the success of those trees will be really important and valuable. And Peter and I have talked about this too, so this is really just me repeating it yet again. I know it's in front of you all, and I appreciate that.
Well, thank you. Thank you for all the comments and feedback. It was, I think, very, very helpful. So I think our next steps are we've got a meeting next week at the tree board. We'll discuss the feedback that we received tonight and make some adjustments to the language. We'll look at some of the scenarios on related to the fees and how perhaps we can how they impact some of our project budgets and things like that, and come back to council with that information. And then we certainly have some work on some of the language on some of the code that I still need to get some clarification working with Justin on. But I appreciate all the feedback. So hopefully we'll be back real soon with a package for you. And that's all I have. I think Natalie's got the next topic. She's going to give you a brief update on climate and our municipal green project that we're looking at.
Yep, great job, tree board. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
And yes, Peter already beat me to the introduction. So there you go, Natalie. And
Hi, everyone. Natalie Rogers, Climate Action Sustainability Coordinator. I'm just here today to give you a brief update on the work we've been doing with PGE, Portland General Electric, on developing a exploring the development of a carbon-free energy product to offer Milwaukee customers. So I just wanted to remind us, why we're here having this conversation is because you set these 3 climate goals for our community, and you even recently accelerated them to, by 2030, we'll have net zero emissions from electricity, 2035, net zero emissions from building fuels, and by 2045, Milwaukee will be a community-wide carbon neutral city, which is really exciting and really emphasizes why we need to be working on developing our different renewable and carbon-free energy portfolios. So I just also wanted to give you a brief update on some of the work that we've been doing, just unrelated to this specific product development, but still related to achieving these goals. Peter and I have been working pretty heavily over these last few months with both PGE as well as Northwest Natural, our natural gas provider, to form a stronger relationship, explore different products and opportunities that can come to our community, as well as strategize for ways for us to achieve these pretty significant goals. Having a stronger relationship really pays off. That's shown by some of the great products and great opportunities that PGE has implemented in Milwaukee, like our smart grid test bed, as well as other opportunities on the horizon. We have one fast charger in our downtown corridor, Electric Avenue, but we're always exploring other ways to increase EV charging in our community, and a strong utility relationship helps that. Another thing that we've been working on is through building code advocacy. So outlined in our climate action plan essentially directs us to explore ways to make more energy efficient building code. This is really important because as new buildings are developed, they form a long legacy. They're here for a long time, and it's very expensive to retrofit an existing building. So if we have high standards off the bat, that means that new buildings are energy efficient. It helps us in the long run with both affordability as well as very significant carbon emission reduction. I want to remind us all that building energy is the #1 source of emissions in Milwaukee. So what we can do to reduce that sector is going to be very important. 2 elements of the building code advocacy we've been exploring is REACH code. So REACH code is associated with both residential and commercial building code. A REACH code essentially goes above the base code as what's set by the state of Oregon. Oregon is a state which preempts local jurisdictions from adopting their own building code that goes above the state code. So it's important for us to make sure that the state code reflects what our community wants and needs to achieve our climate goals. So we're having a lot of great conversations with quite a few different stakeholders in the region about the development of REACH code, to make sure that our values are really incorporated in that development. And I'm excited to keep you guys updated as we learn more information. We're kind of at an interesting point right now. We're almost in a wait and see position. I know there's a lot of work that's happening in the region, so we're kind of watching with wide eyes to make sure that we can jump in when necessary. Another element of building code, or maybe not building code, is EV ready code. EV ready code is essentially where you are requiring there's multiple levels, but you're requiring a development to be able to accommodate electric vehicle charging in some capacity in the future. It could range from just having conduits, so the electrical systems available to tap into at a later date, to actually installing chargers themselves. This is something that we're exploring to see how we can incorporate it in Milwaukee, and we're talking to a lot of stakeholders in the region to see what we're allowed to do currently and what we need to do to be able to allow it in the future. There we go. And then the final thing also that's really exciting that I've been working a lot on and is coming up soon is our Home Energy Score program. So this is starting on October 1st, 2020, so this year. This is very exciting, and I've been talking to a lot of other communities around the state of Oregon who are right on the precipice of implementing or adopting their own residential energy disclosure ordinances. And they're looking at Milwaukee as a model, which is fantastic. So we did just launch our home energy score web pages on the Milwaukee website. So if you go to sustainability department, you'll see a home energy score button to click there. And then there's a lot of great pages with some information on the home energy score program, how it works, what it entails, and some resources for both industry professionals as well as residents, as well as information about other things like our low income assistance program, and then just links to our climate action plan and why this matters. Another thing we're working on is just formalizing contracts, especially for our low income assistance. It's working through Community Energy Project. And then also just really solidifying those internal processes. So that's going to be on my end, just managing things like exemptions and compliance. So that is coming this fall. We're doing some outreach. I just talked to a representative from Portland Metropolitan Association of Realtors today to make sure that we have good information going out to our realtor community. Hopefully you saw a post or an article about it in the pilot from this last month, and then we'll be doing some social media posts, reminders, as well as more articles in future pilots. So very excited about that, and I look forward to October 1st. So back to PGE. So as we mentioned the last time we were talking to you folks, we are exploring a carbon-free product development with PGE. So that's our electrical utility, which would be designed as an opt-out carbon-free electricity product. There's a lot of values to an opt-out product in that there's increased participation, but it still provides that flexibility for people to make a personal choice. This product would essentially start as a larger unbundled REC mix, meaning that we're purchasing the attributes of renewable energy, transitioning to new build generation infrastructure as we achieve our goal in 2030. It is essentially setting a standard rate that would be paid out throughout 2030 to help build new infrastructure without having these spikes in costs of rate. But that is also something that we're exploring that we could maybe play with to see what impacts might have. So Milwaukee would need a product like this to help us achieve our 2030 goal, just makes it more feasible to work with our existing utility. It's less of a lift on our end. And then we're working with PGE to design a product that matches our preferences. So, we've had great conversations with you about whether or not Milwaukee has a preference of location of generation. That means, do we care if a new solar development is, in Oregon or in the Willamette Valley or in Nevada? We also talked about generation type. So do we care if it's wind, solar, hydro? And it sounds like we have a preference for a varied mix if possible for resiliency, as long as it's carbon free at time of generation. And then we also are working with PGE to explore different rates. That's affordability is something that's a priority for our community. So we're making sure that we keep that in mind as we have these conversations and we work to design these products. We're also collaborating with other communities in the region to see where we both align as well as where we may differ in what our communities prefer on design. So we're talking to City of Portland, Multnomah County, and City of Beaverton have also been approached by PGE to help start to conceptualize what interests these communities have and what a product may look like. All of our communities have climate action plans, which is, I think, why PGE is prioritizing initially contacting these jurisdictions. But each of our climate action plans are slightly different, which means that we're each kind of having different preferences as we start to develop this product. And so in those conversations, there's some differences that we'll need to explore just because there are benefits of being a larger group pursuing new build infrastructure. There's always, the economies of scale that might work in our favor. At the same time, there's also different priorities and timelines and speed of build. which might make it a smarter or wiser choice for our community to pursue a product independently. So there's a few topics that we've been kind of focusing on as we're having these conversations, both with regional stakeholders as well as with PGE. And there's, we're also bringing in the Oregon PUC, the Oregon Public Utility Commission, as well as CUB, the Citizen Utility Board, and having great conversations about these topics. The first one I just wanted to touch on really briefly was just the legislative requirements. When we came to you before, we told you that there were kind of two pathways for product development. There was one that works through an existing tariff, which essentially is allowed through just review from the Oregon PUC. The current Oregon statutes allow these kind of tariff product developments. It may be a simpler process, but the more information we learn, the more we're not sure how simple of a process it would be to work through a tariff. There's also potentially a legislative pathway, which would potentially provide more guidance as PGE works to develop this product. Depending on what this product gets designed to accomplish, may be required. That's something addressing, what audiences, what customers, in that last bullet, customer class applicability, essentially who would this product be designed for? Some of our communities also differ in engagement needs. Sorry, we have a loud puppy who's trying to go outside. We're trying to, some of our communities differ in engagement needs. And a predominant example is City of Portland is doing a lot of great work with their climate justice programming and conversations. And so they're wanting to take a more slow and robust approach, it sounds like, to really pursuing these topics and getting feedback. And so as we have kind of this scale of timing, as well as these community conversations, we just need to keep that in mind, that we might differ in kind of how we go about development of this product. And so we're learning more information about what requirements these communities have, to see if maybe there would be value in matching that process, or maybe there's value in, once again, going independent and kind of going our own way. We're also talking about rate projections. Prioritization is affordability. We still want to have a great grasp on kind of how these rates are created and what contributes to the different costs, that we would be seeing potentially in any product development. So just having a firmer idea about that, and seeing what we can potentially tweak to get us the cost that we want. New building timing. This is something that we've been having really interesting conversations about, which is there benefit to having this new build, meaning putting steel in the ground? When are we actually building a new resource? When do we want to essentially do that? Sooner, later? There's pros and cons for both. And it's really tied to both our community goals, as well as some of the numbers that we're seeing from both affordability as well as the final kind of carbon-free mix that we might have. And then finally, customer class applicability. Utility customer classes are very complicated. It's all tied down to not necessarily what a business might identify themselves as, but more of how much energy they use, and then they fall into different customer classes. So you might have a commercial entity that's more closer to residential in scale than you would have industrial. And a concern of PGE and a concern of ours is that we have in Milwaukee a lot of direct access customers, which are customers who can essentially create a power purchase agreement with an energy service provider, essentially going out of PGE's products and buying their own electricity. This is a concern because there's not as many, we don't necessarily have as much influence over what type of power is purchased, and there's opportunity to potentially purchase cheaper but more carbon intensive electricity mixes. So we have to be cautious when we're exploring a product like this, in that the product is designed in a way that does not encourage these large electricity consumers to pursue something like direct access and essentially create a negative consequence that we were not intending to do. So we're making sure to talk to PGE about that. We want to make sure that we decarbonize as much of our grid as possible. Milwaukee is a lot of our grid, almost 60% is these large industrial commercial loads. So it's something that's pretty important to us to figure out a solution to. So, you know, we just have to, once again, keep these in mind. But, you know, these are ongoing conversations, and we're constantly learning more information. We have meetings with PGE almost, I feel like, bi-weekly now to talk about this product, answer any questions. They're always sending us new scenarios to go over to weigh in. And I will say that Milwaukee is at the forefront of developing or exploring something like this with PGE. We are more in the weeds than any other community, I would say, in PGE's territory in these conversations. I think we're asking some of these hard questions that that other communities benefit from knowing the answer to. So once again, my screen just went black, so I'm hoping that you folks can hear me. There we go. Anyway, so I just wanted to, looks, and it even ended me out. Finish with this, essentially just saying, you know, we're having these conversations. We're hoping to keep you posted, especially as we reach these points where we're going to really need to make some hard decisions as we develop this product. And there's a lot that goes into it, both in the design phase, as well as once we achieve a product that we want. And then we're going to have been doing pretty robust outreach and engagement. I hope to keep you all posted, and I'm very excited about this product because I think no matter what, I think that it's going to offer some opportunities to increase the amount of carbon-free electricity opportunities that folks can take advantage of. So are there any questions? I know I talked really fast.
I have a comment that I just want to make sure that I tell you again, because I know I've told you like every time that you come to us with a presentation. I love that you end your presentations with this slide, not just questions, because the community is obviously going to have questions too. And this gives them a way to, like, as it's fresh in their brain, find you. You are the person with like all of this great information who can answer all of these questions. And so I just want to give you huge kudos in front of Anne and Peter and encourage other employees to do this in their presentations as well, because I think this is a really good practice and it should be encouraged, if not required. Thank you very much for doing that.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Great. Well, if there are any questions, you can contact me here. I also encourage everyone listening to go visit MilwaukeeClimateAction.com. That has our climate action plan, as well as, you know, our household and business and organization plan that offers strategies for folks to take their own initiative and see how they can help us achieve our climate goals. And look at that, I finished ahead of time. That rarely happens.
Well, before we jump off, I actually wanted to go back to something that Council President Faulkner just said. Council, we can have this be a requirement at the end of any slide. It's your presentation. So if you guys would like us to, we can put this into the slide deck.
Sure.
I love it. I think I just, every time I see Natalie, you do this, I'm like, oh, that's such a great idea. I love this so much.
Yeah, I'll let Scott know and we'll add it to our official slide deck.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think it's really smart. There's no reason not to.
We just need, that's right, we need relevant donut pictures for everything.
or cookies or
Well, I think there are a lot of relevant. I have an urban forest cookie picture too. Baked goods joins all communities. Great. Well, thank you.
Anything else? Anybody else?
If it's not obvious from the presentation, Natalie is doing some serious intellectual heavy lifting on all of this and in the PGE negotiations, and Peter is too. And I am so grateful that we have such skilled and dedicated people who are helping move this work forward, because we really, truly would not be doing it without you. So thank you to you both.
And she was soft pedaling it when she was talking about how much on the forefront of this Milwaukee is. The other entities have really slowed down their efforts here for a number of reasons, but Milwaukee is definitely the forerunner.
Well, and I will say it's because we have the opportunity to be able to talk to you guys quite frequently. You know, I think that as small as we are, that means we're nimble and we can make these quick decisions with your support a lot faster. And I always tell folks that I'm very fortunate in that whenever I, you know, come to council, I have way more support for climate action work than some other folks do in their communities. So, you know, I think that we have a lot going for us when we're doing this work, and I think other communities are recognizing that. So thank you.
Alrighty then. Well, if there's nothing else, I guess we are adjourned.
Thank you.
Great work,
Thanks, everybody.
Everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.